The New York Mets beat the Dodgers in a late night extra innings thriller, but they also may have lost Mark Vientos to a hamstring injury. Could this open the door for Ronny Mauricio? We'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, we have so much to talk about in this show today. There was an extra innings thriller I'm going to get to right now. You have Paul Blackburn, who showed well in his season debut, so we'll talk about that a little bit in the next segment. Then, to close out the show, Ronny Mauricio could be coming up because Mark Vientos went down. So, a lot to get to. Let's start from the top, which was one heck of a baseball game. My notes here, I wrote this in the 10th inning after the Mets had scored 2 runs, and Jose Castillo was going out there to try to get a save for the Mets. And I wrote down, regardless of the result, the Mets played one heck of a game to kick off their series versus the Dodgers. And then in my notes that no one can see but myself, I wrote the Mets lose the game in extras when Jose Castillo and Jose Butto can't get the final 3 outs. I was trying to reverse jinx it in my own notes to myself because I was nervous, but that's not what happened. Those two somehow held on to get the job done, and the Mets put forth just an incredible effort against a really good Dodgers team and what was a great baseball team. I know a lot of you weren't able to watch it because start time of 10 o'clock at night, and a lot of you have work in the morning, but that's what I'm here for, to take you through all of the action. And it opened up with Francisco Lindor leading off the game with a home run, his 14th of the season, 4th in the last 4 games. And now the Mets, since they did hold on to win this game, end up with 27 consecutive wins when Lindor homers. So that continues to be a very good sign whenever he leaves the yard. The Mets would score another run in the 5th inning as Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez each got base hits, and Brandon Nimmo hit a ground rule double, which he scorched, by the way. You typically see ground rule doubles on either line, a ball that's tucked into the right field corner or the left field corner. You don't often see ground rule doubles that are hit into deep right center field that one hop the wall, but that's exactly what it was for Brandon Nimmo, and actually cost the Mets a run because Francisco Alvarez, I believe, was the trailing runner. Yeah, he was. He would have scored on that play. I mean, I really think he would have. But unfortunately, that ball goes over the wall. They had first base open, so the Dodgers intentionally walked Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso flew out. So the Mets weren't able to cash in anymore. I thought they had a pretty good game against Dustin May, who has great stuff, and we saw it throughout 6 strong innings for him. The Mets had their chances in the 4th inning. Juan Soto hit a ground rule double. This one, your more traditional one with those low walls at Dodger Stadium down the line, hit one, that he drove down to the left field corner, and it just bounced over the wall. Pete Alonso got hit by a pitch, so the Mets were in business, but they couldn't cash in. And then again, you had that opportunity with the bases loaded where Alonso flew out, in the 6th inning. Brett Beatty ripped a single up the middle. Tyrone Taylor hits a hard line drive as well, but just right at Max Muncy, and then Jeff McNeil flew out, so they weren't able to cash in Beatty. And from that point on, the Mets went down in order every inning to close out the game until we got into extras. In the 8th inning, both Juan Soto and Mark Vientos, hit balls very hard that were just knocked down by the wind. Looked like potential home run balls, or at least balls that were going to, for Soto at least, get down for a double, and they were both caught. So the Mets, I thought, had a better offensive game that the line's going to suggest, but it was just one of those near October baseball-like games where each team is playing great defense. No one's making many mistakes. I mean, Pete Alonso made an error when he was trying to throw one to the pitcher, which has been common. He ended up probably getting in his head a little bit about fielding the ground ball, and he just botched it. But didn't botch the throw, but botched fielding the ground ball cleanly. Other than that, though, I can't recall a misplay by either team. I mean, both teams just playing really crisp. And we'll talk about Paul Blackburn more in the next segment. He was very good in his season debut. 5 scoreless innings on 77 pitches, allowed just 3 hits, 1 walk, struck out 3, was able to strike out Shohei Ohtani, I think 2 times. So really good outing by him. You saw the Mets bullpen really have to get pushed because the Dodgers do not make it easy on you. Huascar Braziban had a really tough inning. Max Kranick, Ryan Stanek, all of them had to work hard to get 3 outs. Kranick, the only one that gives up a run, a solo homer to Shohei Ohtani, but you really can't knock him for that. And otherwise, Kranick looks pretty solid. 18 pitches to get through his inning, struck out 2. Braziban actually had the toughest task. Coming in right after Blackburn in the 6th inning, he gave up a base hit to Freddie Freeman, got a couple of outs, but walked the bases loaded from there with 2 outs. And Tommy Edman comes up. He's able to strike him out to strand all 3 runners. Ended up throwing 32 pitches. So we'll talk about that a little bit in the next segment. This bullpen's going to be tired tomorrow. So it's Braziban for the 6th, Kranick for the 7th. Stanek pitched a scoreless 8th. Needed 22 pitches to get through it, but was able to. Worked around a 1-out single. Edwin Diaz comes on for the 9th inning. Mets holding on to a 2-1 lead. Diaz gives up a leadoff single to Tommy Edman. Edman promptly steals second base in the first pitch. And now you got runner on second base, 1-run game, a quick runner on second base. Very tough situation for Diaz to try to pitch himself out of it and pick up his 14th save of the season. Gets a big strikeout, but then gives up a base hit on a ball that was ripped up the middle. Francisco Lindor did a great job saving a run by just keeping the ball in the infield. A great diving stop. Tried to make a throw to first, but he had no chance. I think it was Hae-Sung Kim who was running down the line. He's also very quick. So all of a sudden, you got runners at first and third, 1 out. Shohei Ohtani up. Tough spot. You need to strike him out. And Ohtani ends up hitting a sacrifice fly. Brandon Nimmo did a great job, honestly, just catching that ball. Made a great running catch as the ball was hit very hard and barreling, away from Nimmo. He had to really run over there to get it. Ends up being an easy sacrifice fly. And then Teoscar Hernandez comes up, and Diaz was able to strike him out to keep the game tied. So while Diaz did blow the save, he didn't really get hit too hard. Couple of base hits, some fast runners stealing bases. Nothing you can really do about that. And it puts the Mets in a position where they have to score in extra innings, and they hadn't scored again since the 5th inning. And Tanner Scott was coming out of the bullpen, but Tanner Scott has not been great this year. And the Mets were all over him. Francisco Alvarez had a really nice game with a couple of hits. Hits a leadoff double that drives in Luis Angel Acuna, who came in for defense. And then you have Starling Marte, who pinch runs for Alvarez, and he scores on a base hit by Lindor, who rips one over the third base bag to give the Mets an insurance run that they ended up needing. Turns into the game-winning run. So an outstanding game again by Francisco Lindor. Bookends it. Leadoff homer, game-winning RBI single in extras. Also stole his 11th base of the season in extra innings to try to get another run across, but the Mets could not plate him as Brandon Nimmo struck out looking. Juan Soto rolled one over, grounded out. Pete Alonso drew a walk to potentially give Vientos a chance to play hero. Vientos, again, hit one hard in the 8th inning that looked like it was out off the bat and got knocked down by the wind. Then he hits another one hard, this one in the hole for the shortstop. Thought it might have been a close play, even with Vientos' speed. But then as you're waiting to see the throw and if it's going to get the runner, Vientos is nowhere to be seen on the screen because he was trying to run hard out of the box. He trips and pulled his hamstring, looking like an IL stent. We're going to close the show there. Definitely an ugly look for him. It's been a bad season. Not an ugly look as far as anything that he's at fault for, but just he went down in a heap and it was an ugly play. So we'll see how serious that is. Obviously, that's going to be a story to follow this week. Getting to the final 3 outs, Reed Garrett was unavailable. So you got Jose Castillo and Jose Budo as your final line defense. Castillo was called on to get the save because 3 of the first 4 batters were left-handed. So he comes on to try to get the job done. Freddie Freeman is his first customer, and it was a tough at-bat. Freeman draws a walk. Andy Pajes, the one righty that was in that mix, ends up getting a base hit, hits it into right field, ground ball that finds a hole. That scores the ghost runner. You have runners at first and second, nobody out, 1-run lead. And again, it's Jose Castillo with Jose Budo warming up in the bullpen. Castillo is able to strike out Max Muncy. I thought Dave Roberts was probably, a little too hesitant. I'm surprised he didn't go for a pinch hitter for Muncy, as Muncy has been brutal against left-handed pitching this year. The Mets will take it. He then was really late to call a pinch hitter for Michael Conforto. Waited till Conforto was in the batter's box before he stepped out and called Will Smith into the game, and that brought Jose Butto into the game. Butto, who had been brutal with inherited runners on throughout this season, has all of a sudden found it. He's proven me wrong. He's pitching really well. I got to give credit where credit's due. He had those two situations with the bases loaded where he got big outs. Another situation with 2 runners on. His last appearance, got a couple of outs, was able to get the job done, and here he was again. Huge spot, extra innings, tough ballpark to pitch in, tough lineup to pitch to. A good hitter in Will Smith coming up. Gets the job done, gets a fly out to center field. Then he makes a great play on a comebacker. I think it was Tommy Edman who hit it, but regardless, a ball that was ripped right at him. I think it was 99 miles per hour off the bat. And he's able to stick his glove down there and field it. If he doesn't field it, Dodgers probably at least tie the game. I mean, that ball was destined to go up the middle, and they were going to score there. Instead, though, he makes a great play, able to make the easy flip to Pete Alonso, and the Mets are able to escape with a win, and it's a huge one because you now look at the rest of this series. The Mets bullpen's completely taxed. We're going to talk about that in the next segment. They got Tylor Megill going, and then Griffin Canning after that. Canning has struggled his last couple starts. Tylor Megill as well has been struggling a little bit. So the Mets are in a precarious spot, but they've at least forced a situation where if everything goes wrong from this point on, David Peterson will have a chance to pitch you to a series split in LA. So the Mets did what they had to get a victory. You fight for another day tomorrow, but that is going to be a tough battle. I want to talk about Blackburn's season debut and where this bullpen's at, because there's a world where Tylor Megill now, out of necessity, is once again pitching for his life, and he might be heading right to Syracuse after this start just because of the state of Mets pitching. We're going to go through all of that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is a reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, help us get to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. All right, so let's talk about Paul Blackburn first before we get into the state of Mets pitching for the rest of this series. Blackburn, he's been in the lab. They talked about it during the broadcast. He has not pitched in nearly 10 months, over 9 months since his last start. But that does not mean he has not been working. He has been in the Mets pitching lab, and it showed completely abandoned the four-seam fastball. And they said that is a pitch that he has moved away from, was not throwing it in his rehab starts. Last year, his four-seam fastball got hit to the tune of a 286 average against, which isn't horrible, but the slug against was 694. 6 of the 12 home runs that he allowed last year came on the four-seam fastball. His sinker, batters hit 478 against the pitch. In 2023, the sinker was hit hard as well, a 306 average against. The four-seam that year had a 383 average against. So instead, what was Paul Blackburn's counter? What is the game plan moving forward? It seems to be a heavy diet of cutters. His cutter was his primary pitch. Part of that was a lot of lefties in the Dodgers lineup, and he was really working that cutter against lefties. Against righties, it was more of a sinker slider mix. What it seems like the recipe is for Blackburn is to work east to west against lefties, and then the opposite of that against righties, where he's either trying to pick off strikes on the outside corner when it comes to the cutter against lefties or the sinker against righties. And he's also at times throwing those pitches in on the hands. So now you might be looking for that cutter outside, but instead it runs in on you and he's able to saw you off, potentially get some weak contact on the ground, whatever it is. He also has a changeup that he was mixing in plenty against lefties. That's going to break in the opposite direction of the cutter. And then he's thrown his curveball against lefties, threw it 10 times, all against lefties. And what you're seeing here is just a lot of movement on his pitches going in all different directions. So he's kind of going with a kitchen sink approach. He's working east to west. He's working north to south when he's working that slider or the curveball in there, and also mixing speeds well, because you have a big difference in velocity with the curveball and the slider coming in the low 80s compared to the cutter, the sinker. Those are coming in over 90 miles per hour. His changeup is in the high 80s. So he's able to mix speeds, able to go north, south, east, west. He really is just throwing a lot at batters. And you saw different points where he did leave some pitches over the heart of the plate, but guys weren't squaring things up, and that can change. The scouting report gets out there. He certainly could get hit hard. I'm not going to take one start against the Dodgers and say, oh, this guy's amazing now. He's been in the lab. He's awesome. But you could see how he could be a very effective pitcher for the Mets, whether that is in the rotation or out of the bullpen in long relief. He has a lot of weapons at his disposal. It definitely seems like his arsenal is more optimized now than when he first got to the Mets last year, which makes sense. At that point, it's tough to make changes. They've had a full offseason to work with him. He had spring training where he was in the lab. Remember, he got hurt in spring training, but it was at the end of spring training when he had the knee injury. And now he's been working through a lot of rehab starts. I think he's going to be a nice piece for the Mets. Is Paul Blackburn guaranteed to be on this roster for the rest of the season? I will not go there because the Mets have so much depth right now. But as we'll talk about in the next segment with Mark Vientos, you never know what's going to happen. And so a quality big league piece is a valuable asset. And Blackburn's that. He is a big league starting pitcher that is either going to stay in the rotation or pitch in a long relief role. And you can see how he's going to be able to be effective and get batters out. I do think that as the scouting report gets out there on him more, he's going to have some rough outings at certain points. There was, again, some pitches he certainly left over the heart of the plate, but I think he was keeping hitters off balance enough that even when they got a pitch they could handle, they were fouling it off instead of, really driving it. They were just missing it, whether it was, hitting fly balls that were caught or, ground balls that the Mets were able to make plays on. It was a really solid outing for Blackburn that does give you, definitely some optimism that he could stick in the rotation moving forward if that's the play the Mets decide to go with. Here's where things get very complicated. On yesterday's show, I talked about how Blackburn was destined for a bullpen role because that is what's been rumored. But your bullpen's completely taxed right now all of a sudden. Okay, you needed pretty much every single available guy to get through this game. The only guy that didn't pitch out of that bullpen was Reed Garrett, and that's because you're now a man down with a 6-man rotation, at least just for this game. If Blackburn ends up in the bullpen, of course, you're back to an 8-man bullpen. But after throwing 77 pitches, he's not going to be available to pitch out of the bullpen until this weekend at the earliest. You're not going to have him for this series. You're probably not going to have him on Friday. That would be, 3 days rest? So you're likely looking at Saturday before he could be part of the bullpen, which means you're already a man down. Now you look at what they have available on Tuesday. Huascar Braziman threw 32 pitches. He's got a rubber arm, but I don't know if he's going to be good to go. Edwin Diaz threw for the third time in 4 days. He's likely out. Now, Reed Garrett should be good to go, but you had everybody else pitch. So Kranick has not thrown back-to-backs all year, although I think he might be in line to because he hadn't thrown in a week, but that's still a question mark. Is he going to show up to the ballpark ready to go? Ryan Stanek has not been using a back-to-back all year either. Think he could be, and he might have to be, but it is worth noting, Jose Budo, typically you wouldn't use in back-to-backs, but he only threw 7 pitches, so he might be on the table still. But again, all of these guys put in a position that they're not typically accustomed to throwing in. Jose Castillo, he threw, 13 pitches? I'm not sure how many pitches he threw exactly. Hard-fought pitches, hard-fought at bats, I should say, but you likely got to go to him if you need arms. So if Tylor Megill gets knocked out of the game in the fourth inning, you're screwed. So what do you do? Who can you call on? Obviously, Garrett, after getting a day, should be able to give you an inning, but I don't know if he's going to be able to give you 2 innings. He's been used a lot lately. So this is where you might have to grab a fresh arm. But how do you do that when you have 6 starting pitchers on your roster? And you can't option Paul Blackburn. Doesn't have any options left. So the Mets are between a rock and a hard place here. And if you look at their options, the one thing they could do, if Mark Vientos is destined for the IL, which it certainly looks like he is, the way he went down with that hamstring, you can do the same thing the Mets did earlier this season when Jose Siri went down, which is you keep Mark Vientos on the roster for a day without bringing up a replacement. So you play a man down with your position players, better than playing a man down with your bullpen. You bring a fresh arm up for the day. You option Max Kranick, and then after you get through this game, or maybe the next couple games, whenever you think that you want Kranick to be added back onto the roster, then you make your move. You put Vientos on the IL. Kranick is able to come right back up because typically if a player got optioned, they have to stay in the minor leagues for a pitcher for 15 days. But if there's an injury, they can come back immediately. So that's what you would do. You would have Kranick come up for Vientos going on the IL after getting a rest day. You bring some fresh arm up and you roll from there. But again, let's just say that Tylor Megill doesn't go deep or he has a bad start. That's another way you can get another fresh arm up because now you can option Megill. He'd have to stay down for 15 days, but you have Blackburn ready to be in the rotation. He's already there. You can go the 5-man rotation, keep an 8-man bullpen, and mix and match fresh arms as much as you have to get through this road trip. And so the Mets, out of necessity, might have to option Tylor Megill. Now, if Megill, pitching for his life, goes out and gives you 6 strong innings, and you brought up whoever it was, but you might not even need that pitcher because you were able to throw Stanek in a back-to-back, and he got you an inning, and then Jose Budo got you an inning, and then Reed Garrett shuts the door, and you win a game, all of a sudden, all right, well, now some other guys got rest, and you're able to maneuver your roster in a way where everything can work out. And you can keep a 6-man rotation. You can keep Megill in the fold. You can buy your time. And Blackburn can be in the bullpen over the weekend. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Mets play it. But Tylor Megill, once again, has his back against the wall, and you'll see how he does with it. We'll see exactly what the Mets choose to do. There's still a world where he can go 5 innings, give up 2 runs. It's not a bad start. And the Mets, by necessity, have to make a move. Now, the question is, who's the move for this upcoming game if the Mets do grab a fresh arm? Justin Hagenman is on 3 days rest. He is a stretched out arm. So if you're just looking for a guy to come up and potentially eat innings for you, Hagenman is an option. He's working on ERA of 7.88 right now in AAA, so has not thrown the ball well. But that's just get the most stretched out arm possible up to potentially soak up innings in a game that you might be punting, very similar to the way Dodgers punted games against the Mets in the playoffs once they fell behind. You might see that type of a strategy just to survive. We saw Brandon Waddell the other day, wear one for the Mets and throw 94 pitches out of the bullpen. Maybe that's what Justin Hagenman has to do in this situation. If it's not him, you're looking at your other options. Chris Devanski can't come back because he was optioned. So theoretically, sure, you could have Devanski come up to replace Vientos, but you can't have more than 13 pitchers on the roster. So then to get Devanski on the roster, you still have to option a pitcher unless you're ready to say goodbye to Jose Castillo, which I don't know if the Mets would be. Then it's probably Kranick. And then you lose Kranick for 2 weeks unless there's another injury because you just use that loophole to get Devanski back up. So I don't think they'll do that. Same goes for Brandon Waddell. You'd have to call him up for an injured pitcher. So unless the Mets have a pitcher they can stick on the IL, that's not an option. That leaves you with guys on the 40-man roster, Ty Adcock, Daniel Nunez, Austin Warren, or Tyler Zuber. But the Mets did not have a starting pitcher on Sunday in Syracuse. So all of those guys pitched on Sunday. Now, you have Adcock, who threw 12 pitches. He makes the most sense. Nunez threw 13 pitches. He hasn't looked great necessarily. Having him on a day's rest flying from Syracuse late night to LA, I don't know if that's necessarily the move for the Mets. Warren was the starting pitcher in the bullpen game. He threw 2 2/3, so don't expect him to get the call. Zuber got 4 outs. He's been bad all year. Both of them threw a bunch of pitches. They were both close to 40 pitches thrown, so I doubt either of those guys get the call. If you look at non-40-man roster guys, you have Rico Garcia, Grant Hartwig, and Colin Poche, who all pitched on Saturday, so they all have an extra day's rest at their disposal. Rico Garcia and Grant Hartwig have been pretty good so far this year and good lately, so I could see either of those guys getting the call. The Mets 40-man roster right now sits at 38, so they would not have to make a 40-man move to get one of those guys up. They just have to add them to the 40, and then again, option Kranick for a day, and then you could bring Kranick right back in Vientos' spot, and that'll give you the fresh arm you need for this game on Tuesday. And then you have to have all the tough conversations again after Megill pitches, and you see what you need to get through that game, and you decide what you have to do to get through Wednesday's game. And hopefully the Mets can eventually get this bullpen back in good order, but you don't have an off day this week. So this is the typical struggles of a 162-game marathon. These situations come up where the bullpen gets taxed, and we'll see how the Mets can respond from here. It's great that they were able to win that game in 10 innings tonight, and they didn't have to push things further. And we'll just see how they navigate their way through it. But this is why a 6-man rotation is so difficult to maintain on a big league roster, because you can only have 13 13 pitchers on your roster at a time. So, in an ideal world, sure, you just would say, hey, we're going to put Vientos on the IL, call up a different arm, and we're going to roll a man short right now with your position players. But you can't do that. So this is where tough decisions have to be made. And the fact that Tylor Megill has that option looming, it just allows the Mets more flexibility to take him off the roster after this start. Again, though, if he pitches well and you can get to a point where you have Blackburn available out of the bullpen in a role that could be where he's at for the rest of the season, because if Frankie Montas comes back, he's going to grab a rotation spot. And Sean Manaea is facing live batters again this week, and then he's going to start a rehab stint. So you have those guys on the mend. It's a very interesting spot that the Mets are in right now, but they just have to see what happens. You take things day by day at this point. I've already had a long show. We still have a very important topic to discuss, so we're going to close the show there. Mark Vientos, is he heading to the IL, and could Ronny Mauricio be taking his place? We'll go through it all in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money. You can start to build wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money through a partner is smoother than ever, as you can track your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks in the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get a line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about this situation with Mark Vientos. Vientos comes off the bench for Jared Young late in the game against a left-handed pitcher, gives one a ride, looks like a home run off the bat, got knocked down by the wind, ends up being a flyout. Gets another opportunity, hits the ball hard in the hole, tries to beat it out in an RBI situation, but he doesn't really make it far down the line, trips, and clearly pulls his hamstrings, grabbing it as he's walking off the field. Those situations almost always end up in an IL stint. And if Vientos ends up going to the IL, you would have to think Ronny Mauricio is in serious consideration to come up to the big league club. Now, we've been talking about Mauricio for a couple of weeks now. He's been healthy. He's been working his way up. He's been playing in Syracuse for 9 games now, has had great success. He's 17 for 33 so far. That's a .515 average, 3 home runs, a double. He's even stolen 4 bases on 5 attempts. He looks like he is a healthy player that's hitting the ball hard and ready to contribute. Now, up to this point, I've talked about why Mauricio would not come up, though, because the Mets did not have a clear role for him on the big league roster. Mark Vientos does not have any options. So you cannot send Vientos down. Now he's hurt. That opens the door. But prior to this injury, he was locked onto the roster and he has so much potential. You're not going to just have him waste away on a bench role, just not playing at all. You have Brett Beatty, who has earned the everyday third baseman job because he's playing great defense over there, continues to put together good at-bats. He's not going anywhere, even though he has an option. Jared Young was brought up, and the Mets clearly value him. There's obviously some people in high places that think this guy can really be an impact bat at the big league level. He's given you really good at-bats so far, had the one big game, but he's never out of an at-bat. He's always up there fouling off pitches, getting into good hitters counts, just doing what he can. He's hit the ball hard a lot of times. So Jared Young right now is going to get the priority over Mauricio because you feel better about having Jared Young play. Maybe it only is 3 times a week compared to Mauricio, who you want to see just get out there a bunch because this is the first time he's played baseball in over a year. So getting him game action has been the priority, and playing a bit role, whether it was replacing Young's role or replacing Acuna's role, which right now is pretty much just speed, defense, and the occasional start against a left-handed pitcher. That's not where you want Ronny Mauricio to be right now. You want him to be playing consistently, and without consistent at-bats at the big league level, there was no reason to force him up. You could let him continue to play, get his legs under him, and just see when an opportunity would present itself. Now an opportunity has presented itself, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what the Mets do. You could, if you want to, continue to lean into Beatty, McNeil, who's been swinging the bat well, Jared Young, and still Acuna. And you could just call up any placeholder. If it's Joey Meneses, maybe add him to the roster as a guy that can hit lefties potentially. Gilberto Celestino has had a good year. Those are guys that if you wanted to just bring up a random right-handed bat, you could do that. And that is still the direction the Mets could go. But I'd be very surprised if it's not Mauricio because this could be a real chance to bring him up and give him some run and see what it looks like. This is a supremely talented player. And I have had a lot of mixed takes on Mauricio throughout his Mets tenure. And obviously, I've been doing this show since 2019. I have covered pretty much the entire journey with Ronny Mauricio. And he's a guy that's been a top 100 prospect at times. Other times, he's fallen off top 100 list. What does he do well? The tools are allowed. His ability to steal bases, to hit the ball really hard, all of these things can jump off the screen when you're watching him. Or when you're in person, I've said this before, if you line up all the guys on the roster and you have someone who is a casual baseball fan and doesn't know anybody on the New York Mets, you say, hey, pick the best player on this line. You might just point at Ronny Mauricio and say, that guy's a physical freak. He's got to be the best player. And I talked about how in 2022, I went on a little minor league road trip where I hit Brooklyn, Binghamton, Syracuse. And at the time in Binghamton, you had Brett Beatty, Francisco Alvarez, and Ronny Mauricio. And you saw Mauricio just pop when you got eyes on him in person. Like for me, I went into that game really talking down on Mauricio based on the swing and miss concerns, the lack of approach in the box, his real free swinger. Beatty and Alvarez were much better prospects at the time. I was going there and I was more excited to look at them than Mauricio. In the game that I saw, Mauricio hit a home run, a double, and hit a couple of loud fly balls too. Like when he impacts the baseball, he hits it very hard. So now you look at him and this opportunity, it makes sense to call him up and to see what you got, see how he does against big league pitching. I could see him getting exploited against big league pitching. Absolutely. You look at the home runs he's hit, it's been against AAA pitchers that have made mistakes. Now you're going to see mistakes in the big leagues, just not as many. And in the big leagues, guys are going to be able to identify your weaknesses and exploit them a lot better than you'll find in AAA. But you still can't discount what he's done and how hard he's hit the baseball. This is a firecracker. You don't know what you're going to get. And we've seen with a lot of the Mets' top prospects that have come up over the last couple of years, Beatty, Vientos, Alvarez, it comes in spurts. So you might get a great spurt from Ronny Mauricio when Vientos is out. He might give you 2 weeks where you're thinking this guy's the future. And then he can go into a dark, dark hole. And by the time that you have a Jose Siri or a Jesse Winker ready to come up, he might still be the guy that gets optioned down. Just like for Luisangel Acuna at one point this season, we were talking, second baseman of the future. Now it's okay. Well, he's doing his job in a bench role, but he's probably not going to be an everyday guy this year, at least. So how do you work all these guys into the lineup? If you have 6 games in a given week, obviously this week the Mets don't have an off day, but for your typical schedule, you got 18 starts between second base, third base, and DH that can be divided up between these guys. Now, Marte is going to get the DH starts against left-handed pitching, but we also saw the Mets put Marte in left field for Brandon Nimmo against the lefty on Sunday. So that's another way that you can mix and match. You're going to have Brett Beatty out there almost every day because he's your starting third baseman. Now, Mauricio could end up platooning with him, where against lefties, you throw Mauricio at third base. And I think while Mauricio, in my eyes, is still not a great defender, I believe he's going to give you better defense than Mark Vientos has this year because Vientos has been brutal. So that's an option to get him out there a couple times a week. At second base, you can stick him out there against the lefty, have Jeff McNeil on the bench. You also can put Jeff McNeil and flex him into center field on an occasion to give other guys opportunities. And you can play Mauricio at second base in those situations. Again, 18 starts a week divided up by these guys. Let's just say 5 of them go to Beatty at third. 4 of them go to Ronny Mauricio. Maybe it's a couple at third, or 1 at third, 1 at second, couple at DH. Jeff McNeil gets in there 4 times. All of a sudden, you count it out. That's 13 of your 18 starts. A couple might go to Marte at DH. So you'll have a few left. Maybe this means that Jared Young doesn't get as much playing time because Ronny Mauricio is a guy that you have to prioritize more on your roster than Jared Young. Maybe this cuts into all of Acuna's playing time when it comes to starts. And Acuna is now just a complete late inning replacement that comes into games and gives you speed and defense. And I think that might be the move if Mauricio's on the roster. But to me, it doesn't make sense to not take advantage of this opportunity. It's one of those things where, again, we've been wondering, how do you get Mauricio on the roster? Now, fate, whatever it is, has opened the door. And it sucks for Vientos, but also in a weird way, it's good for the Mets roster because Vientos was the guy that was struggling that if you had an option, probably would have got sent down for Mauricio. Now an injury opens up an opportunity, and you give Mauricio some run. We'll see how long Vientos is potentially out for. That certainly could impact this decision. If it turns out to be a very mild hamstring strain, you think he's going to be back in 10 days, maybe the Mets do decide to not bring up Mauricio. It's going to frustrate the fan base, but maybe they do bring up Joey Meneses or Gilberto Celestino to just stick somebody on their bench. They give more playing time to Beatty and McNeil, have those guys in there pretty much every single day, and the occasional start to Acuna, and you're still giving Jared Young his run, and that's the way they go. But I feel like this is going to be Mauricio's opportunity, and so we'll see if that is the direction the Mets go. I'm obviously going to be covering that story throughout this week. We should learn more on Tuesday. I do think there is definitely a world the Mets just played down a man for this game so that they could option Kranick and bring. I mean, theoretically, you could option David Peterson if you really wanted to. I don't think they would want to waste an option on Peterson, but again, like you can really play with that roster loophole with Vientos destined for the IL likely to get a fresh arm up. So I imagine we might not know what the decision is on Ronny Mauricio until Wednesday, but it feels like that is the move the Mets would eventually make here. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. A big shout out I have to give, though, before I close out the show. Today is June 3rd. A year ago, my dad and I were in Washington, D.C., celebrating his 59th birthday, catching Mets versus Nationals, and it started an incredible run last season. Now, Mets are in L.A. I'm not with my dad. He's actually up in New Jersey on a little bit of a road trip. They have a wedding up there. Him and my mom are going to over the weekend. And they're just kind of driving around the country right now, doing their thing. They're eventually going to end up in Chicago, where my sister lives, for their summer stay. They always spend the summers out there, as they're now snowbirds. But here's my dad turning 60 today. So happy birthday, Dad. You are my role model. You're my number one listener on this show. I always say that I have the best job in the world with this show because I got to do a podcast for my dad. And I'm wishing you the happiest of birthdays. Yes, you're old because you're 60, and I'm always going to poke a little fun at you, but you're also a rock star at 60. The guy runs 3 miles in under 25 minutes. Pretty impressive. Goes back to his cross-country days. He's still doing it. He's a rock star. He's in better shape than I am right now at 60. I'm coming up on 30. I got to be like him a little bit. Got to get in my lab, lose a little bit of weight again myself, and look as good as he does. But giving my dad the biggest of shout outs. I love you. Hope you have a fantastic day. And I'll talk to you a little bit later because West Coast trip, I'm going to be sleeping late today, Dad. So I'll call you a little bit later this afternoon. I appreciate everybody who tuned in today. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you all for tuning in and making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. If you want to make something your second listen, head over to Locked On MLB and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, which is going to take you around the MLB action each day throughout the season with insight from all of our local experts. You can find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.